Hey everyone, Joe Waxman here again. And in this video, I want to look at the chart of Benedict Cumberbatch. Funny name, always reminds me of, makes me think of cucumbers. Somebody asked me to do this one, so here it is. Let's share the chart. By the way, I saw the latest Doctor Strange movie with my son where he's Doctor Strange, and excellent. I loved it. I thought it was great. Really, really trippy. It was like the multiverse of madness, and they keep putting out these multiverse movies because I think that's where they are at in their discoveries. It's becoming, I think they've been there. You know, the multiverse really means multi-dimension, in my understanding, and it's not a new discovery for them, but they're at the point where they can start sharing this knowledge. It's real. There are multi-dimensions. You know, they're calling it multiverse in cinema, but it's just the reality that there's different dimensions. And different dimensions mean vibrating at a different frequency. That's all it really is, in my understanding. So anyway, here's Cumberbatch. I'm just kidding. Benedict Cumberbatch. Incidentally, he was born a month after me, and he's far more successful than me, but we do have some similarities going on, which is interesting. He's got a stellium in the 10th house, moving into the 11th house, really, but starting the 10th house with a Cancer sun, and then the Mercury, and then Saturn conjunct Venus, exact. Venus being his ascendant lord. So strong 10th house and 11th house. 11th house in Leo. So Leo represents the spotlight, fame, ego, pride, being on stage, all the Leo things, the sunshine. And so that's very prominent. Career, recognition, success. That's all very prominent in his chart. His ascendant lord is going right into Leo in the 11th house conjunct Saturn, very tight conjunction. His ascendant has Pluto on it. One of the most interesting things about Cumberbatch, I'm just kidding, but I don't know why I say that. It's just funny. I think his name's funny, and he's a funny looking guy too. That's what I was gonna say. Like, he's very weird. I mean, that's part of his appeal. If you read, I just want to share this because I thought it was really funny. Not funny, interesting. Here, forgive me, I just gotta switch pages here. Public image. He's been called the thinking woman's crumpet. What's that about? Thinking woman's crumpet. Crumpet's something you eat, I guess. Sexiest man alive. Most eligible bachelor in the UK. Cyber stalking incident. Live tweeting his movements. People are obsessed with him. Most fascinating people in Britain. Higher than the Duchess of Cambridge, just below Queen Elizabeth, just below the Queen. I think he's probably more fascinating than the Queen, but you know, they got to put the Queen at the top because she's the Queen. 50 coolest and most creative entertainers. Cover of GQ, new A-list issue. 100 makers of the 21st century. This generation's Laurence Olivier. Cumberbatch may be the closest thing to a real descendant of Sir Laurence Olivier. 100 most connected men in the UK. Gentleman of the year, blah, blah, blah. Like, he's absolutely adored. Okay, just to put that into context. People love him, and he's weird looking, but they're like, at the same time, they're saying he's like the sexiest man alive. Okay, so why is that? Well, number one, okay, Libras are always, they're gonna have nice, they're gonna have, if we look at the ascendant for the appearance, that's not the only place you're gonna look. You can also look at the sun and the ascendant lord. If they're born tonight, probably the moon, and aspects to the ascendant, to the sun, and to the ascendant lord. Right. So Venus, but then we have Pluto. So Pluto is exactly conjunct the ascendant. Any planet that's conjunct the ascendant is going to play a very important role in that person's life, and it's also going to affect their appearance. So, when you look at his face, he does have that nice Libra, GQ, like just nice face, right? But then there's like the intensity. That's Pluto. Pluto's making it way more intense than he would be otherwise. Okay. And then if you look at his ascendant lord, Venus beauty, all that, it's conjunct Saturn, exactly. So again, Saturn has this quality of it's like solidifying and contracting. Pluto is like this deeply intense thing. Saturn is like this crystallizing, drying out quality. So yeah, those are both really fascinating, really intense. If also, what's interesting is that he's a vegan, and so if you're talking about Venus, just in regular terms, Venus is joys, pleasures in life, women, but like conjunct Saturn, Venus conjunct Saturn, it's going to take a person's indulgences and contract them, right? So now he's like restricting himself with it's also his ascendant lord, but his pleasures, his joys are all going to be restricted because of Saturn. It's not necessarily a bad thing, right? It's not a bad thing to restrict yourself, right? One of the healthiest things we can do is fast. And any dietary restriction, restricting sugar, fat, calorie intake, just consumption overall, that actually is going to help us be healthier, live a longer life, become more, gain more self-control, help us become more evolved and spiritual. Saturn, in that sense, is a spiritual planet. Not only that, but look at the proximity to the sun. If we look at synodic cycles, we think about synodic cycles, and that the sun is moving faster than most of these planets. Obviously Venus and Mercury are separate because they're interior planets, or inferior planets as they're called. They move around the sun inside the orbit of the Earth. So we're not talking about those, but like all the rest, and we're not talking about the moon because the moon circles the Earth, but all the rest, the sun will eventually overtake. And when it does that, when it meets up with them and then passes them, those planets are starting a new synodic cycle. So they're kind of young and fresh and immature. They have a new cycle. Saturn is very old here. This is a very, very old Saturn because it's about to start its cycle over. The sun, if you progressed it, would overtake Saturn pretty soon, within weeks, within maybe a week. I think it moves 1 degree a day. So yeah, you do the math, a little over a week. That's 9 days essentially. Anyway, so that's a very old Saturn. So what is this? So Saturn being conjunct his ascendant lord in a very prominent angular position, it's not in a great sign because it rules Aquarius, so it's in detriment. However, I've known about triplicity lords for a while. I was not using them because I didn't, for some reason, I wasn't trusting them as being accurate, but I'm starting to explore more with them. And Saturn is it's the third triplicity lord of fire, so it does have some dignity. And I'm still just experimenting with it. I don't just trust what's come before me, because a lot of things I read in astrology don't make sense, and I don't think they're accurate. So I kind of have to play with things over time to see if it's really valid or not. So I've come to trust Draconic Astrology and decans I'm exploring with, and all the minor dignities, um, term terms and bounds, triplicity lords. And it's not just if they work or not, it's also how they're used, because some of the things that they explain, if you read up about it, which I've been, doesn't make sense to me. And I don't think it's accurate based on my experience. I have to base it on experience, otherwise it's not going to work. And that's why I like doing readings where I can verify a person's life. That's, like in celebrity readings, a lot of it can be verified, not everything. You're not going to get the nitty-gritty details, but in any case, my point was that this is a very mature Saturn, even though it doesn't have a lot of dignity in Leo. It has some, being the third triplicity lord. I have my Saturn in Leo just because we're born a month apart. But because of the distance from the sun to Saturn, he gains a lot of authority, is what I'm trying to say. This is a very mature Saturn, and it's adding to his intensity. It's adding to his authority in as an actor, as a celebrity, as a person. Like, there's just this intensity about him, and it's not just we could attribute a lot of that to Pluto on the ascendant, which again is very powerful. It's making him this dynamic, Plutonic person. But not everyone who has Pluto on the ascendant is going to be a Benedict Cumberbatch. So I mean, it's obviously much more than that. We know it's much more than that. And not everyone who has their ascendant lord conjunct Saturn is going to have this amount of authority, this amount of appeal. Obviously, the moon is playing a part, which I haven't even gotten to about that. But my point is that this Saturn being old and mature definitely helps with his authority, right? Saturn is it's the discipline, it's the rule, it's the law, it's the structure, it's the bones, the framework, the hard work. It's Chronos. It rules time, so it becomes stronger with time. It also represents a strong Saturn will give somebody that authority that comes with time. So he has a very Saturnian quality to him, a very well developed Saturnian quality to him. That's what I'm trying to say here. It's also in the sign of the sun, so it's disposited by the sun, very close to the sun. And it's a part of this T-square, which I also have. And he's got North Node conjunct Uranus, South Node conjunct Chiron, very similar to me. Chiron opposite Uranus. There's quite a generational aspect, as they both move at very similar speeds. So you're going to see this with many people. Uranus opposite Chiron. It's a painful aspect, and it could show trauma, because Uranus often shows trauma. Chiron shows wounds, rejection, being an oddball, being an outcast. Also, it can show a lot of wisdom as one matures, because Uranus is that awakened aspect, especially a mature Uranus, not an immature Uranus. His is not bad because it's beyond the opposition point of the sun. If we're just taking it in relationship to the sun, which is usually, it's pretty significant. The synodic cycle relationship to the sun is pretty important, I think. A lot of people think. And then Chiron is still in the early stages, first quarter, but Chiron can show a healer and a teacher, and an astrologer and a wise man. So it too has this developed quality. But this is a painful aspect. Square Saturn, and then more even Mercury in his, both, because Saturn, because Uranus is at 3 degrees, so it's in between these, but Chiron's at 1 degree, so it's more square Mercury. So like I said, this can show some traumatic injury. I don't know that he had anything like that, but there's some issues here. Uranus is ruling the fifth house, maybe having to do with children. It's co-ruler Aquarius. Chiron is often associated with Virgo, so perhaps something to do with 12th house issues, subconscious, his creativity, foreign lands. And he does have some issues with foreign lands, which I'll get to, but it's also square Saturn, Venus, especially Uranus, and Uranus square Saturn is a rebellious aspect. I have that rebellion to authority because Venus is the independence, the planet that doesn't want to follow anyone, that rejects everything that came before it. Like anyone with a strong Uranus, you're not going to want to be like, well, this is what the book says, and this is what everything that came before us says. But Uranus was just like, fuck off. Like that doesn't apply to me because it has that God complex and it's not a follower at all. Right. I have it conjunct the ascendant, and it's very difficult for me to look at like old literature, old books, old astrology texts, and just be like, learn from that. I don't learn that way. And I try to be polite, but I'm like inside, I'm like, fuck off. Like, don't even talk to me. Because I do have a bit of a God complex about, following. I'm not a follower, and it's offensive to me because of the way I am. But anyway, Saturn represents the opposite of that. It's all about the law, the rules, being like, following. Saturn is not one to rebel. Saturn's like, this is the way it's done. You better do it this way, and don't you dare stick out of line. And sometimes he is going to be the Saturn dealing with people who are rebellious, and sometimes he's going to be the rebel dealing with authority because it's a square. It's not a conjunction, right? And this can be both internal and external. Squares will do that. They'll shift back and forth between internal struggle within oneself and meeting that struggle externally in the world, where it's somebody else either being, he's dealing with rebels, or he's dealing with authorities trying to tell him what to do, and he's like, no, screw you, I'm doing what I want, right? So that's that, and it's also against his ascendant lord, so that he's going to meet. It's interesting because this is conjunct his north node, but this is his ascendant lord, so he's running into struggle with rebels, which I want to share the Wikipedia again because here, while in KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa in 2005, Cumberbatch and two friends, Theo and Denise Black, were abducted after bursting a tire and held at gunpoint by a group of locals. Eventually, their abductors drove them into unsettled territory and set them free without explanation. Blah, blah, blah. But because this is his ascendant lord and it's square Uranus, he's going to run. That's going to be, he can have that happen to him. He can meet the rebellious radicals who are at square with him because Venus represents him. And we might see that elsewhere, different versions of that playing out. He did teach in when he was young, he went to a foreign land and like Tibet or something and taught. And so that is that's Mars in the 12th house. Mars is ruling his second house, teaching. So teaching is second house because voice, speaking, right? So speaking, foreign lands, and Mercury in the 10th or late 10th, early 11th. It's very prominent for speaking ability, teaching. Yeah, I mean, that's obvious, right? Jupiter is also the teacher. It's in the 8th house. 8th house doesn't represent foreign lands, but it doesn't represent secret and hidden places. but monasteries we generally consider 12th house. So that's, I guess, Mars in the 12th house ruling the second house. Also seventh, I mean, relationships in general, teaching. Moon is conjunct Lilith, exact. Just almost completely exact in Aries. So that I think does have to do with him being like this sex icon. It's one of the sexiest men alive, even though Lilith is often associated generally with women, but hey, you know, I guess it works with men too. Especially if it's in a prominent position, like it's conjunct his moon in Aries in the seventh house. Aries being a fire sign, definitely going to push that out. Like fire really comes out, right? Not saying it couldn't be like in a water sign and still have a similar effect, because water is very sexy as well, but definitely it's really going to be exposed with, you know, the Aries. And the seventh house deals with the masses, relationships in general, things of that nature, a lot of things. But yeah, Moon is ruling the 10th house. So yeah, 10th Lord in the 7th. That's very prominent because the 7th is the 10th of the 10th. If you count houses, it's 10 houses away from the 7th. So it is the career of the career. Yeah. We could also look to Venus, Mars, and as well as Moon, if we want to look at triplicity lords for career significance, which still makes sense. You know, Leo being planet of fame in the house of career success, Mars in the 12th house for creativity, movies, things of that nature. And then Moon is still the same thing. Jupiter's in Taurus in the 8th house. Jupiter's ruling the 3rd house and the 6th house. With the 6th house, it's good because their conflicts go to die in the 8th house. To put it very simply, when malefic rulers go into malefic houses, it's considered good. It's not good when malefic rulers go into non-malefic houses, because then it brings that negative energy there. But a negative and a negative do apparently make a positive in astrology. So Jupiter is also the great benefic. So it's going to somewhat benefit the 8th house, which is the house of death. Jupiter also in the 8th house is going to bring inheritance. And one of the really, I'm going to share my screen again. One of the really interesting things about Cumberbatch, big batch of cucumbers. His parents were actors. His grandfather was a submarine officer, prominent figure of London high society. His great-grandfather was a diplomat who served as a consul in Turkey and Lebanon. His great-great-grandfather was a British consul in Turkey and the Russian Empire. His great-great-great-grandfather was a wealthy slave owner in Jamaica. That's not so great, but maybe that's an 8th house issue. Cumberbatch is also third cousin, 16 times removed, of King Richard III, whom he portrayed in The Hollow Crown. He intended 2015 reburial, blah, blah, blah. And then he was like renowned as an actor as a child. The best schoolboy actor he has ever worked with, drama teacher. So that's all Jupiter in the 8th, because the 8th house deals with inheritance. And Jupiter being a great benefic, and it's I guess neutral in fairly neutral in Taurus. It's not good or bad, but a lot of inheritance. right? And it's also ruling the third house of communication. So sixth house in the eighth, which I already mentioned, means that conflicts and disputes go to the eighth house to die. So like that issue where he met the rebels, and that's sort of like a sixth house, eighth house being ruled by Jupiter. It just didn't go anywhere. Jupiter is also sextile his sun, so that's quite good for success, luck, benefits in general. Yes, he is religious. He's a Buddhist. Mercury ruling the ninth house, close to his ascendant lord and Saturn. And then the Saturn again, the Buddhism is very kind of a restrictive, not puritanical like Christianity, but restrictive, because you're supposed to be, good person, eat vegetarian, if not vegan. Well, not vegan. Vegan's not, that's in monasteries they're vegan, but normally Buddhists are not, that's not a thing. Vegan's not a healthy diet. I studied health my whole life. Vegan is not a healthy diet, but some people may need to avoid meat for a while. Anyway, it's another topic altogether. But Jupiter is helping his sun, and then the sun is in Cancer, which Jupiter loves. So, yeah, that's quite good. South node is trine Mars, and the trines to the nodes are the only aspects I give to the nodes are conjunctions and trines and squares. Squares are difficult, and it's going to be square both nodes, but trines will be to one node only, because see, it's sextile north node, but it's trine the south node. So that's similar to a conjunction. So south node trine Mars would indicate that south node is connected to Mars. Mars ruling the second house and seventh house. So south node is bringing the inherent skills of past life or being born with those qualities. So voice and seventh house, that's additionally making him more attractive to women, right? The opposite sex, partnerships. He has he's not just an actor, he does tons of voiceovers and radio, and his voice is very he's also a known speaker. Like it's not just acting, it's also his voice. So that's apparently what that is about. Also, North Node is in Scorpio, along with Uranus, conjuncting the second house cusp. So his voice from South Node to Mars, both. So when he's young and when he's getting older, it's still going to be that voice, that acting, that speaking ability, that quality. North Node conjunct Uranus also indicates that as he gets older, he's going to become more independent, more radical, more just like, I'm doing whatever I want, and I'm not following the rules, whatever those rules may be. And all you followers, but he is. He's and that's a conflict for him that he's going to have to work out, because his ascendant lord is tightly conjunct Saturn. And what that can look like when he resolves that issue is something like Aquarius, unique among the crowds. Aquarians are just very accepting, even though they're completely different. So that's a harmonious combination of Uranus and Saturn. So that's what he's going to have to come to, is sort of like an Aquarian vibe. Because Uranus is only one half of Aquarius, and I struggle with that because I'm square Saturn, and Saturn's a pain in my butt. Like, I just do not want to integrate my Uranus with my Saturn, but it has to be done eventually. Anyway, let's look at his Draconic chart, because I think it's quite interesting. By the way, what's really interesting about his chart, if we just pull up the sheets and look at the dignities, I'm just looking at the declinations first. These planets are not that dignified. Like if we just look at the scores that they're giving here. And I don't understand exactly how they're doing this. It's still new software. I need to read like watch some tutorials to learn what exactly I understand term, phase, detriment, fall, triplicity. I just don't understand exactly how they're doing it. Anyway, my point was that he doesn't have like super dignified planets, and still he's like world's sexiest man and whatever, like that. Anyway, in his Draconic chart, he has Jupiter in the first house, and Jupiter gains directional strength here. It is one of the triplicity lords, so yeah, Jupiter's super good in the first house. It also does make him somewhat of a teacher, or at least he feels like he's a teacher on the inside, because you feel this on the inside in the Draconic chart. And then he's got all these 12th house planets in Virgo, which also is quite good. And here we notice, because it's in the same sign, that how close actually Moon and Chiron are. So what's interesting is that even though Lilith is exactly conjunct his Moon, and that's like super, sexy, whatnot, Chiron is here. Chiron's out of sign. See, it's 1 degree Taurus, and so that's a cutoff. But here, inwardly, it's very close to his Moon. That's a conjunction. That's 3 degrees, right? So inwardly he feels quite different, and it's deep in his 12th house. So it's like this weird, like, subconscious feeling like he's not, like he's different. And because Chiron is that wounded reject, so it's so there's something there in his subconscious that tells him he's not quite ordinary. Maybe he has some wounds, subconscious wounds, subconscious hurt. Wound is the deep inner feeling, deep inner emotions, emotional satisfaction, our mother, our past, our childhood upbringing, ruling the 10th house. So definitely an unusual career path. But the 12th house is a house of creativity as well, because it's the subconscious, and we draw creativity from the subconscious. So there's a lot of creative energy going on here. A lot of imagination. This stellium is in Sagittarius in the 3rd house, so again, expression, excellent for skills, talents, especially skills of the hands. Not that that really applies to him, but just skills in general, and expression, writing, speaking. Actors generally have strong 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 12th, 11th, 10th, 7th, 5th. I mean, you can see it everywhere, but so it's just more confirmation. Mars is exalted here, and so here we get that exalted Mars ruling the 7th and the 2nd. So there is something about him, even though it's not even though it's more subtle and hidden, that that 7th house and that 2nd house, that his ability to relate to other people, the women stalking him, obsessed with him. Well, that's also Pluto on the ascendant, but an exalted Mars also for his voice. He's got that voice that very prominent voice, and it's also opposite the sun. So I didn't even talk about this. That just the moon, yeah, sun square moon, which I also have. And then it's opposite, and then the square to exalted Mars, which is, so this is T square, sun. And they're dispositing each other, well, except for Saturn, but sun to moon, sun in Cancer, disposited by moon, square. So that's good and bad. Well, not bad, but just a lot of tension, requires hard work. What satisfies him emotionally is at odds with his personality, his ego. So those two things But what's interesting is that this is the sign of Sun's exaltation, Aries. So there is not, it's not a mutual reception, or I guess a mixed reception, because this is Sun's exaltation and this moon's rulership. And then here we have again more reception because Mars rules Aries, square to moon. Mars square moon is not so great for female relationships because again there's that tension that's very masculine. But I mean, this is draconic, right? Draconic Mars, so it's a little different, but still an inner tension between him and women, relationships. Sun opposite Mars can show issues around his masculinity, male aggression. Maybe that's why he feels the need to be vegan and Buddhist, because you know there could be some very, and Mars again in the fourth house is not a healthy place for Mars. It's too much energy. It's like Mars at home. You know, Mars wants to be out in the world doing stuff. Mars at home is like, you know, kind of like a bull in a china shop. It's just like too much energy, right? And Mars opposite the Sun indicates just sort of an aggressive tension inwardly, fights, you know. Sun being the father, you know, he could have opposition, feel, you know, issues around the father, negative feelings, hatred towards the father, things of that nature. Yeah, there's some definite tension there. And then again, Mars ruling the seventh house. So relationships in general could be an issue. Fifth house ascendant Pluto. You know, fifth house for actors is creativity, very important. And then Neptune. Yeah, I think the most prominent thing here is the Mars. You know, Neptune the seventh, that's great for creativity and you know, acting, stuff like that. But that Mars is pretty interesting. Especially for his like sex appeal and playing this role of a, you know, plays very Saturnian roles, but also very Martian roles. Like I remember he was in Star Trek and he was fighting Spock. And he was excellent at that. What was he? Terrible to remember the name, like Khan, Wrath of Khan. He was Khan, I think, wasn't he? Anyway, he was fighting Spock, and he's like Doctor Strange. He is strange, right? Chiron, Chiron. That's strange. Okay, and then Pluto as well. So, that's Cumberbatch, Benedict. So, anyway, hope you found this interesting, and don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and share. You want a reading? Go to my website, macrogoldmachine@yahoo.com. That's my email. I'm sorry, I haven't even had my coffee yet. My website is macroastrology.com. My email is macrogoldmachine@yahoo.com. And yeah, like, comment, subscribe, share. You know the thing. All right, that's it for now. Bye.